Hello and welcome to Saltgrass. Today we have another episode with Zoe Scoglio and the Castlemaine Commons Collective. Zoe's been collecting audio from local community members and stories about community connectivity and how resilience can be built and how people can help each other out in times of difficulty through history and currently what people are doing currently. And we've got two new interviews for you today. We'll be sharing Madeline Hudson, who many of you might know as Madz. She's been doing community lunches with Community House, and she has also been involved with Growing Abundance recently. I think she's on the board there. And we also have Lorraine who is very active in the disability space as an advocate and has got some beautiful things to say about some reflections, I guess, on nature and how she sees things tied in with that as well. So before we start, I always like to acknowledge country. We are presenting from Jara country, home of the Dja Dja Wurrung, who have been custodians and caretakers of this land for tens of thousands of years, and sovereignty was never ceded.
Salt of the earth. Salt. Grassroots. Salt of the earth people. Grassroots change.
Saltgrass. Listen to all episodes of Saltgrass on your podcast app or at saltgrasspodcast.com. All right, Zoe. Hi.
Hi, Allie.
Thanks for coming back in, and I'm excited to share these interviews you've collected. Tell me about these two people and what you sort of found out as you spoke to them and why you thought you'd put them together today for us.
Yeah, so as you mentioned, I've been collecting different stories, and we've had a few sessions together now where I've shared excerpts of some conversations I've had with local people in the community who are involved in different sorts of community organising and thinking around collective care and how they work together to understand how to create thriving communities and in the face of increasing precarity as well. What are the role of community groups, and understanding and thinking through and learning about existing community groups, and Castlemaine and surrounds have many.
Finding the wisdom of those who've done it before.
Yeah, and in all sorts of places and in all the many forms that community organising takes. So it's a big task, but it's part of my own learning as someone recently arrived to these lands, to this country. This country being Dja Dja Wurrung country.
Yes.
And so Madz was someone I spoke to whose name both people were suggested through other people when I was sort of chatting informally, and
That's often the best way to find people, isn't it?
Yeah, I feel like the human network is the best place to start, and then see how that can hopefully spread out further afield. So I'd also been to community lunch, and my parents talk very highly of it because they've been many a time, and Madz at the time was the chef there and is involved in all sorts of really interesting projects around town. So we had a chat and a walk through Kalimna Park together, and there's an excerpt here of our conversation. She's also, as you mentioned, involved with the collective Growing Abundance, which I won't talk about more now because she talks about it really well in the interview.
And people might remember Madz. I did an episode with her last year sometime when she was running a zero waste cooking course with Community House. So if you've been listening to Saltgrass for a while, you might remember that show, and you can always listen back to that on the podcast site. But I think you guys have some different things to talk about. So let's listen to your conversation with Madeline.
So community lunch is like a hub that connects to the community kitchen garden, and then there's other community gardens that are in development in terms of, connecting people more. Growing Abundance is a collective that its main thing is harvesting the surplus fruit in people's backyards, especially, let's walk down this way. Go a little window. Oh, does it go back around? Yeah, it comes down. So yeah, Growing Abundance is, a volunteer, not-for-profit organisation, and it's just people who love food and love trees and want to share that abundance that we have, because there's so much. There's so much food. It formed in 2010, and there's been a lot of different people in the collective over the years, and the last few years it's just been a bit of a quiet time, and so we just reformed to keep the committee going and keep the organisation incorporated, so we can keep doing reaching out to the community. And it's the connection, like food's so much about the connection to each other, which is so important, and our collective nourishment and nurturing and our resilience at this point in time. Yeah, a lot of people have little mini orchards, and they might be at a phase in their life where they're older and they don't have the kids, coming through. Or we did an apple harvest. We just did a small harvest with the new collective because we were just starting out and finding our feet. And the perfect recipients were an older couple who just bought a little place in Harcourt, but they've got 25 trees or maybe more, and they were like, is exactly a Growing Abundance sort of mission was. They were like, oh, how are we going to look after, how are we going to harvest all this fruit? We don't want it to go to waste, and what are we going to do with it? And so we came in and harvested it all and then cleaned up underneath, because now with fruit fly it's this extra imperative to be looking after the fallen fruit and looking after the trees and all that sort of stuff. So fruit fly is a really major issue for people. So there's an even greater imperative for organisations like Growing Abundance to be operating. And
what was the strategy to kind of contact or find people who had fruit trees or to connect them?
Well, there is an old database. There's a database. And then I think it's just, can be through, word of mouth. I have some connections from people who have donated to their community lunch. They've got, heaps of pears or heaps of quinces or all that sort of stuff. So, yeah, there's an existing database. It was a very successful program and people loved it, When Growing Abundance was a little bit more quiet, lots of people, when they found out we were, getting the crew together, getting the gang back together again, with new people, everyone was so excited because it's just such a beautiful thing for everyone. For kids, it's for everybody. It really is beautiful. And hey, puppy. Hey. Yeah, and it's what the villages, what villages and communities used to do. You had the seasonal, the seasonal harvest, then you had the seasonal pressings of the olive oil. We had an apple pressing, which is really great. So we did that at one of the hub garden. So that's another little community garden that's sort of volunteer run, and so we pressed the apple, and it was just glorious. We pressed them. We had the beautiful big wooden barrel and played the piano accordion, and the first golden sweet juice started flowing, and it was just it's like reconnecting to those old ways, reconnecting to seasonal, for me, connecting to seasonal rhythms and festivals and stories and the way we celebrate. And it's the preserving of stuff, that's how I'm really feeling that gap for community lunch. It's like, well, you have the glut of the season when the season's on. And then community lunch is great to be able to process a lot of food, so that works. There's community lunch here in Castlemaine, and then I do Malden the next day. And there's a wonderful cook in Newstead who cooks on a Wednesday as well, Anthony Santamaria. He's a good friend. He does the Newstead community lunch. So the community lunches and the community gardens are important little hubs for people, to come and share space and be nourished and looked after. But it's the value of it is just really so many levels that it operates on. It gives that regular sense of connection for people. So we've also got this thing with community lunch, which is really awesome, and it's just started. It's a little idea for people to grow a row in their backyard. So grow a row of food so if you've got space to grow a bit of extra, you can have a little designated spot where you can grow food for community lunch, which has just started with some garlic with garlic crops. So there's a couple of backyards that we've got a nice crop of garlic growing. And so we'll do that. Hello. Oh, nice bike. Got big fat wheels. What was so great about that season is that we just put the call out for people's backyards and to share their surplus produce, and it just worked. Like, there's so much in summer, like with all the tomatoes, all the zucchinis, all the fruit, the pears, the apples, plums. It was pumpkins. It was just right up to the pumpkins. We pretty much, almost 90% of the fresh fruit and veggies were coming from the community, which was that just made me feel so good. It was like true community lunch, It was like, and yeah, I knew the people. I had a great time because I was driving around. I love going and checking out people's places, and it's like that old village thing where you just drop into each other's places more if you ever lived in a country place. And it was very very inspiring, and it was it warmed my heart. Like, we're so fortunate here, the local farmers market. You can see what's in season. You know what's in season. And when you grow a bit of a garden, you get in tune with that as well. But when I was doing the zero waste cooking and sustainability course, I had this beautiful synergy that was happening with the seasons, where I was like, I saw some beetroots and I was like, oh yeah, we'll make. What I'm trying to say is that the earth informs how, the plants and the seasons inform how you cook. And that's the thing that we're passing on and working with one of the Indigenous cooks, Ira, who's one of the Murnong mamas. This is what we're sharing in our cooking classes. It's not like, let's go, what do we want to make now? What's the recipe? What do we get? No, the other way around. What's here? Jerusalem artichokes are in season. Pumpkins are in seasons. Beetroots are in seasons. It's really easy to feel isolated when you don't have those natural places to come together. The local farmers market, like those. That's true community. Like, they're true relationships. They're not like architected from somewhere else. Like saying, hey, what is community? Comes out of a real imperative and a need, and it's easy. And it's care for ourselves. It's our way back home. Like, we need that healing. So the only way back home is for us to have that connection, and like I said, that direct relationship to, like, food as medicine, direct relationship to the animals, to the seasons, to the earth, the way all the web of, or the whole ecosystem interrelates, that we're being, a part of it. We are nature, we're not separate, all that stuff, but actualising it, and it's, food is key.
There you go. That was Madeleine Hudson, or Madz as she's commonly known around here, talking about the various ways she interacts with different groups around food. She's so passionate about growing things, isn't she?
It's great to hear. It was a really inspiring walk and talk that we had.
Yeah. Oh, fabulous. I loved it. So many themes came out there that I thought were so beautiful. And what came up again and again was that idea of the village and what it takes. And really that's, I think, what a lot of community work is doing, is filling the roles of what would have happened in a village, of people just caring for each other and making sure that people who, for example, she used the people who are in a later stage of life who aren't able to manage their orchard anymore. People come around and help, and then we all share in the abundance of that.
Totally.
Hence the name Growing Abundance.
Yeah, it was great to hear both in her chat and as you'll hear in the excerpt from my chat with Lorraine as well. Both talk very much to the multiple layers of value in any kind of organising that goes on, how it's, there's sort of secondary and like there's the primary impulse perhaps, but it's very complex, and both sort of look at the ecosystemic nature of what goes on, how it's not just valuing the people that get to eat the fruit, but there's value as well and benefit from those who, as you say, have orchards or excess fruit they don't know what to do with, and how community and connection is formed in many different ways all the way through that process. I love the way she points to the connections that are formed, the human connections that are formed through the process of the gathering, of connecting and going to people's homes, and the processes of connection through the cultural activities that form through the harvesting and the sort of ceremony and the cultural forms that help celebrate as well through those processes and connect to a particular moment in time and place, looking at the seasons and what's going on in the natural world. And then the community that's formed through the eating of the food as well, and, through community house. So, like, all those levels being considered, I thought was really inspiring in that chat, and really important to think.
Truly that, like what's that phrase? Farm to fork, or, you can really see, and what she talked about in terms of knowing exactly where what she was cooking had come from was just really deeply satisfying and a wonderful thing.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah, so I was really intrigued to hear that they'd started in 2010.
Yeah, because am I right? Because I'm being someone that's new to the area, I haven't really heard. I haven't really heard much about Growing Abundance, and
it has been really quiet, as she said, for the last 2 or 3 years. They've been very low key and understated, and just sort of operating very much in the background. But
such a great idea, and you know a bit about it. You were here when they started, weren't you?
I was, and I'd only been here for a year, and I hadn't really involved myself in the community yet. And Growing Abundance is one of the first things I did that I joined in with, and really felt connected to community because of it. And it was an amazing back then. They had many people who you would be familiar with now, like Lucy Young, who's at the Hub Foundation, and she's now running the Yimby Compost Initiative, and Ellen, who was talking to all the local shops, and she was trying to make sure that they would mark whether produce was in 50 kilometres of where they were selling it from. So really marking the local so people could value that. And then Sass, who you might be familiar with from Gung Ho Growers, was running the harvest team, and it was huge at that point. Like, they all threw heart and soul into that whole project. But I really remember one case in particular, which is similar to the example Madz gave, which is of a lady who had the most beautiful house and garden, and in her younger years she must have lived there the majority of her adult life with her husband, but she was a widower and she was quite elderly at this point, and they had developed the most beautiful garden. They had an extensive orchard of trees just on their suburban block. It wasn't a huge block, but they had jam-packed it with fruit trees, but she just wasn't able to prune and maintain and fertilise and harvest and what to do with that harvest, even if she was able to pick everything. And then, at the right time of year to thin the trees so they don't get overburdened and, protect them from predators. All of the stuff, all of the maintenance stuff you need to do with an extensive orchard. And she just wasn't able to, but she had such strong memories of living that life. And I'm sure for someone like that, it would have been really heartbreaking to see her garden not being cared for the way that she and her husband had cared for it for so many years. And we came in and we ran, I participated. Growing Abundance ran pruning workshops. And so we'd all be there pruning the trees, and they'd be showing us how to prune them properly and how to sanitize our clippers and all that stuff. And then they'd go back and they'd harvest. And of course they gave some to the household, but one lady is not going to eat that much food, and she doesn't want to spend hours bottling things either. But definitely the household was given a share, but they didn't. Most people generally, when there's a glut of food, are very happy to give it away. Everyone's offering you zucchinis at the same time of year, right?
Yeah, totally.
Which is about now.
Yeah, it's amazing. I'm really in awe of that, being here, living in the countryside for the first time, and just the amount of fruit trees and the amount of produce that
it's really different to the city, isn't it?
Yeah, it really is.
And I guess what was really interesting to me, which is again just reflecting on what Madeline said, was how quickly you felt connected to the person that you were interacting with. So I didn't know that lady, and I actually haven't seen her since. But every time I go past that house, I have a memory of climbing through her trees and cutting things, and the morning tea that we all had together. And it really did help me ground. It did help ground me in this community and help me meet people and get to know people and with similar values and similar interests. And it's a beautiful experience.
Yeah, so hopefully there's some more events they've got happening in the future.
Oh, I'm sure.
But even like what you were saying about the learning, the space of learning how to prune a tree, how there's benefit on all scales, and the sort of the morning tea or the culture that is embedded within how you harvest and how you sort of run the operation and the organisation being so important as well as a way to connect and get nourishment in all the levels.
Yeah, definitely. Absolutely. Yeah, it was great.
Yeah, I saw actually, I was looking at the website, which is really great. And I don't know, I'm not up to date with where they're at, but there definitely was a part on the website that has a call out if anyone has fruit trees that they want to put forward or want to volunteer.
Great.
That's on the Growing Abundance website, which is growingabundance.org.au for anyone out there.
And it's worth checking out that website, I reckon, just to see what they're doing.
Yeah.
And I'm sure they've got a mailing list you could sign up to if you want to find out a bit more and hear about things like bottling or preserving or apple pressing and cider making or whatever else they'll do.
Yeah. Yep.
So it is, I think they're wonderful things that they're sort of everyday mundane arts that most people historically would have just known how to do for their household, and that was part of the labour of having a household. But we've lost so much of that knowledge these days. Most people in Australia just buy stuff from the shops, so I think it's so important that more and more of us learn those old skills of how to preserve stuff and keep food viable so you can still have pears midwinter or whatever you want to do.
Yep, totally.
Yeah.
Yep.
You're listening to Saltgrass. I'm Allie, and I'm joined with Zoe Scoglio, who has been working with the Castlemaine Commons Collective. What we've got coming up next is a woman who works in a space that is needing often a lot of care and that a lot of people often don't think about as much as maybe we could. Zoe, do you want to introduce Lorraine?
Yeah, so this is an excerpt of our conversation that we had last year with Lorraine Lepastriere, who's a local artist and is also a member of MASDAG, which stands for Mount Alexander Shire Disability Advocacy Group, who are doing all sorts of awesome things locally. And as it says on their website, their aim is to promote systemic change that supports equitable social participation for the wide range of disabilities experienced by residents in their area. And they understand the importance of social inclusion for everyone, including those with disabilities, their families and carers. So I had a chat with Lorraine at the Rotunda at the Castlemaine Botanical Gardens, along with there were lots of birds nearby, a few trains and people passing us. And that space was an interesting space to meet her in because MASDAG had advocated for a ramp to be put in to allow access for those with wheelchairs and other walking difficulties to access. But as she talks about in this clip, the ramp has been of big benefit for all sorts of people in the community. So the work that MASDAG are doing are not just benefiting people with disabilities, but end up being of benefit for the entire community.
This ramp going up here wasn't provided, and MASDAG got that put in place.
Amazing.
Yeah, it's easier for everybody.
Yeah.
You know, there's a group that come and play here, practice their music here, and they can carry all their double basses and all their gadgets up here as well. It's just easier. Yeah. MASDAG had organised a professional development with about 30 council staff, and they had to go out in teams of 5 and go to, say, significant places from A to B all around the town. And every 10 minutes they changed from having sticks to pushchair, electric chair, scooter, being blindfolded or being deaf or having sounds come into their ears. And every single one of the workers came back shocked because they hadn't had that experience. So, you know, the different experiences that become available for people in all sorts of things, not just disability, but in all sorts of things just make us better people. A couple of ramps, there was one of the engineers was in a pushchair, and it took him 5 goes to get down the ramp because it was so uneven and had a lip on it, couldn't get down. And I said to him, we turn around, or get up it as well. I said, we turn around and go backwards with our wheels first because they're bigger, and he did that. It took him 5 goes to try and get across the traffic lights at Forest and Barker Street. That was fixed. There's ramps. Yeah, we have made improvements. There's in Forest Street between the football ground and the entrance into Campbell's Creek. I've been going across there, and there's quite a few older people, old ladies mostly, who'll say, "I bet you had something involved in getting this bit in the middle of the road so we can get across the road easily." And I said, "Yes." And just simple things like that make it so much better. I feel as if the country wraps itself around me, But in terms of people, even if you don't know someone, you can go down the street and, by coming in here, this man stepped right across the other side of the path so I'd have a free run at it. And I said, "I'm not that bad a driver." And he got the giggles, and then I got the giggles. But we didn't know each other. But, people feel safe enough so that they can just strike up a bit of a conversation. That's another thing about living in a smaller place. Even if you don't know someone who has a disability, eventually, if people pass me in a scooter or something, I wave, and then after a little while, the next time they pass, you'll say hello, and then after that, you'll say, "How you going?" or whatever, You just develop that trust in each other. But even people without disabilities, I think it's vital.
Yeah.
I worked with the council as part of a MASDAG representative on a COVID-19 group, which was about communications, about getting ideas and information out to people. And one of that is that stuff that's in the IGA, that plastic containers, and in the front of the library, all that information. Like, that was working to try and get the information to people. And the library is one of those places that, again, people come together and they feel safe, as well as the resources that are available there. A lot of people who are very single in their concepts of life go there and feel comfortable. Yes, and particularly in COVID-19, when you sort of shut down and all of your life patterns get changed, if suddenly you're down the street and someone starts talking to you, so the next time you see them, you just feel that much better, and you sort of building bonds with them, and yeah.
She's absolutely right. That was Lorraine talking with Zoe about MASDAG getting ramps and things put around town, but also just the beauty of being out in the community and how those connections happen slowly over time, but gradually, when you see someone over and over again, you start to gradually smile, say hello. Next time you might say, "How are you?"
Yeah.
Those sort of things. It's really subtle stuff, but that's how connections are made, isn't it?
Yeah, they are. And that element she talked about a lot around safety and trust, these things that she feels are more present in a country or regional setting where it's easier to build up those incidental relationships with people on the street through random encounters, because there is a slower pace of life, and also people feel safe enough to stop and talk to strangers.
It's really interesting, isn't it? I don't know, because when I moved up here from Melbourne, I really noticed how quickly I learnt to smile at people I didn't know. And when people first move up here, like when you go back to the city, sometimes I've now become a country kid, because when I go back to the city, I'll just smile at people on the street and they look at me like I am so weird, or like I want something from them, or they get a bit scared. And it's like, "I'm sorry, I'm just from the country." But it's a really different sense of who you're sharing a footpath with, isn't it?
Yeah, and I think there are many factors at play. I think it's also that overstimulation. When you're in a city, you have to self-censor to not be overloaded by the amount of people and things that are passing you by.
And you often are accosted in the city by people who want something from you, like a donation or something, or they're trying to sell you something. And I don't know, I feel like that happens less out here. And there's just, because in a small town there's a culture of it, it just becomes, it's self-perpetuating too.
Yeah.
So that sort of smiling at a stranger or making a little bit of polite conversation as you stand outside the fish and chip shop instead of looking at your phone and scrolling or whatever, which we still do sometimes.
Yeah, and also having more time, and of course that's a generalisation, but I think the slower pace, which of course is enabled as well through a lower cost of living, usually. Anyway, obviously that's changing as well with gentrification and the like, but people are really busy in the city in a way that just makes no sense. I mean, people get busy here too, but in general there is a slower pacing that allows for stopping and noticing and connecting.
Absolutely.
And that's what I loved about both Madz and Lorraine's chat, was thinking not just about community groups like that are very fixed and determined, but how community is formed through different encounters slowly over time. And what Lorraine also talked about in our conversation was a study that had been done around the impact of different architectures in town, different social architectures such as seats and tables, and a study that was done on the impact that these very simple architectural elements have on people's sense of well-being and connection.
Yeah, great. It's really interesting, isn't it? And what she was saying about making people go through town with either a blindfold on or earmuffs so they can't hear things, and limiting their mobility and making them actually live the life of someone who has limited sensory capacity or mobility, how shocking that was for people who actually are the ones who are making the decisions about urban architecture.
Yeah.
I thought that was such a great thing for,
yeah.
for them to organise.
Everyone should do that. I mean, that's the thing as well. We have, we can only know the world through our experience, and some people are better at imagining or connecting or listening to stories and experiences of others, but it's so important for all of us to be spending that time. But also I think both with Madz and Lorraine's conversation was that emphasis on ground-up knowledge, people on the ground, and the kind of forms of organising or the kinds of things that form and get addressed or advocated for from these grounded positions of, having a lived experience that requires certain things, or addressing what needs there are and what kind of things can happen in response.
Absolutely. And I really noticed in both interviews as well, because Madz was talking about how that older couple really appreciated people coming to help with their harvest, and then Lorraine was talking about how the old ladies were like, you helped make this safer and better for us, didn't you? And she was like, yes, that was me. But the elderly also struggle with crooked footpaths and difficult crossings and things. And I think we're all hopefully going to get old, but we don't necessarily always think about what other people's requirements are. And I think that's fundamental to this idea of community care, and the idea of the village is that we care for people even if they're not fully able or, whatever stage they're in, they're still valuable to the community, to the village.
Yeah. Yeah, and how, say, like putting a seat somewhere or a table is going to be really beneficial, especially for someone who's not able to walk large distances without needing a rest, and might just need to sit and be in a public space to have that social element, but might not be able to engage in other ways. But of course, everybody can benefit from that as well.
And who still wants to participate and be out and see people and be in the community. And that idea of the library as a safe space too, was I thought was a really nice point to be made, that there are some places that we need to create as safe places for people just to be amongst strangers or amongst the community that maybe you don't know so well, but maybe you will know well if you go there enough.
Totally. I love this line, people who are single in their concepts of life can gather in places like libraries, which is, I love, because not everyone wants to be part of a really active group as such. We all have such different ways of connecting and wanting to be held in community, and I think a big part of this series was about looking at our interdependence and our need for one another, and breaking this very sort of dominant idea of us as individuals and having to survive and do it all ourselves, which is part of this sort of neoliberal mindset.
Yeah. And that if you're not contributing actively, then you're not valuable as well, which for the elderly and the differently abled, that is a really important thing, and why people often feel neglected or forgotten.
Yeah.
Do you know?
Yeah. So what are these architectures that hold space for people to be in relation in all different ways?
Now, if anyone's listening to this and has thoughts on any of these topics, I would love for you to contact us. We have been promoting the text line, but we do only have about 10 minutes left of the show. So Zoe has an email address you could write to for Castlemaine Commons, or even the Facebook group, event that we created for this radio series.
Yeah. It'd be great to hear from people. This is sort of an ongoing open research process, looking into local forms of community organising and community care. So castlemaincommons@gmail.com is the email address if you feel like you've got a story you'd like to share or something you'd like to add. We'd love to hear from you. The Facebook page that Allie mentioned, which can be found on the Saltgrass podcast page or the Castlemaine Commons page on Facebook.
We have co-hosted the Facebook event we've created for this. So next week will be our last one. For the moment, maybe Zoe will keep collecting stories and we could do some more in the future, but not next week, but in a fortnight's time, we'll be back with Zoe. But we do have a little bit more before we go from Lorraine. We've got 2 little pieces and we're going to run them right next to each other. Do you want to introduce them? The first one will be plovers.
Yeah, plovers. Lorraine was also sharing a lot of stories around her love of bird life and connections with birds. And this is her talking about plovers, which I've heard a lot of plovers in the area, but I don't see them often. But it also comes back to the point I just made before around what architectures. I found a really great crossover in her talking about human architectures, but also thinking about the planting of trees or the infrastructure that can help ecosystems as well. Yeah, for different relations with different species.
And as the planet gets more human controlled and nature has less and less space, we need to be really conscious of creating space for ecosystems to thrive. Mm-hmm. Not just give them scraps of land that we can't do stuff with.
Yeah, exactly. And both, like with Maddie as well, coming back to the garden, what you've got in your own garden.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so this is Lorraine talking about plovers, and then she will move on to talking about music groups.
They seem to build their nest, in a very open space that you think, my goodness, this is unprotected and all the rest. But or it's in a strange place like it might be in someone's driveway or something. But I think they've got something inside them that's been their territory, and that's where they're going to build their nest forever. There's 2 up at the hospital, and they put a nest in the garden up there, and there's a wheelchair path that goes up to the hospital because the roads and things are too steep. I love gardening and I love planting native plants, and there's a plant called Eremophila, and its common name is emu bush, but there's 600 varieties of it in Australia, and their birds love them. They've got all these little things that little honeyeaters come, put their beaks in, and you can sit in the lounge room and just watch them. They're fabulous.
And what's it called? The Corker Orchestra?
Corker Orchestra is in Castlemaine, and they practice down at Campbell's Creek Community Centre on Monday nights at 6. Any ability, any instrument. There was a fabulous choir here called the Chat Warblers, which is an all-women's choir, and I've just enrolled in a gospel singing class. There's some really good singers around here. Have you heard of the Blenders?
No, I haven't.
Oh, the Blenders are 4 women who have just got the most beautiful harmony. There's another choir called the Peace Choir.
Oh yes, my parents have done.
That's the choir of all abilities. MASDAG launched a disability access guide for businesses, because 57% of businesses in Castlemaine are not accessible. And we launched it over here, and the Peace Choir came and sang there, and they were just fabulous. And it was just voluntary about who wanted to come, not everybody. But the Peace Choir is terrific. Songs are really good. But that's Wednesday nights at 5:30 onwards, and then you share some food and then you go home. Also, there's a fellow who sits next to me, George, and we've got this really good bond. If you play a wrong note or you're going on the wrong step, there's this little gentle nudge, so that you're going wrong. But it's some sort of a bond that you're playing together and you're hearing them and you're correcting yourself and getting things right. So at the end of the concert, it's huggable. Yeah.
That was great. She's so connected in the community, isn't she? She does so many things.
Yeah, there are so many things going on, and it's great to hear also the different musical groups that are around, at least some of them.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, I've heard of most of those choirs that she was talking about. I haven't sung in any of them.
Have you been involved in any music groups?
Yeah, well, I've been in the Thompson's Foundry Band. I'm not currently a player, but I was for about 7 years. And from that, actually, I hadn't played my trumpet since high school. So it was like a 15-ish or 15-year break between last playing, and then a friend of mine was telling me about it, and I said, I'm really not going to be any good. Like, it's been 15 years since I played and I don't have a trumpet. And she's like, it's all right, the band will give you one, and it doesn't matter how well you play. Like, they can teach you, and there are lessons, and you just have a go, and no one's expecting you to be like A-grade musician. And it was enough that I just went along, and I actually went and sat and listened to them just to get a sense of it. And I got such warm fuzzies. I got such a beautiful, warm, glowing feeling from just hearing that brass music and seeing the diversity of ages and the diversity of people that were sitting in that room together, just having a go and having a blow, so to speak. And yeah, it was really lovely. And I played with them for 7 years. So
great. And
the pandemic kind of put a hold on the band for a year because a lot of the players are a lot older. And then I just didn't start back up again, but they are playing again now. Yeah. And then that led me to playing with other musicians and other music groups with playing the trumpet again. It got me playing. So, yeah, it was pretty amazing.
Yeah, awesome. It's great when it's so open and accessible in that way, where
Yes.
it seems like, you know, people of different experience levels can partake, and how much of it's a space of learning as well. Like that, I love that last comment Lorraine made around the sort of bonds when you're in it together.
Absolutely.
Giving it a go and helping
so
each other out, learning. Like, yeah,
you sit there and you blow a wrong note and you like sort of tense up, but then the person next to you also blows a wrong note sometime later, and you're all in at the same level, you know. And then the better players are always just happy to give you a tip or just, you know, carry the band when they need to. But, you know, but there's different, like, did she mention the Corker Orchestra?
Yes.
Because that's an amazing group as well, where it doesn't matter what instrument you play, you can just show up and they'll fit you in. So it's not a classical orchestra as you would imagine, with particular parts and only so many violins and so many trumpets or whatever. They just fit anyone in. So you might have all sorts of crazy instruments in the same room, and everyone's just there to make music and have fun and be with each other, really. It's music is a beautiful thing to be a part of, and it's kind of the perfect community building creative activity, isn't it? So many creative activities are really solitary, but music only gets better with the more people, and you create, like, the harmonies and the interweaving of, you know, different lines of the music create something that can't possibly be played by just one person on their own.
Yeah. And also that sort of the noise, just the vibration and the energy that gets generated with lots of people making sound together is, you know, on a really bodily, visceral level, you know, is really energizing.
Absolutely.
As well, in terms, and connecting, it's been interesting learning about the nervous system. I've been thinking a lot in my own research around the role of the nervous system and different forms of regulating one's own, but also different community forms, things we do with others to co-regulate. And there's a lot of talk around, you know, making music, singing together, things that you know, also work on this very deeper nervous system level to co-regulate. And that deep breathing. Yeah. So good. Yeah, what that does to kind of create connection and to create a sense of belonging and feeling at ease in the body. Absolutely. Which are all really fundamental things. You're so right. Yeah, it's really good. And what I love about this sort of... And it's similar... You know what? It's similar to community radio. When I lived in the city, I never even thought about community radio stations as something I would want to get involved in, because it seemed either like the cool kids ran it, or it was just so packed with people who wanted to be in it that you had to be really good at it to even get a foot in. But in a country town, you can just show up and have a show on MAINfm and have a go and just see what happens and see how you feel about it and mess around. It doesn't have to be perfect. And I think that's the beauty of so many of these music groups, is that you can just join in and you don't have to be great at it straight away. But maybe by doing it for a while, you can become great. Totally. And I think it's that the process as well. Like, it's not just about an outcome, but the joy and the value is in the process of turning up together, which I think, you know, in these times of increasing precarity, I mean, there's such, you know, with the terrible floods that are happening at the moment, and it's really, present, the shifting climates that we're in and the need for resilience and solidarity and action, but how these forms of being together ongoingly and the joy that it brings, how that can sustain movements that help us address also the shifting world that we're in.
Absolutely. And as you said before, that ability of those things to help us regulate in stressful times. How important is that? It's so important to help each other regulate. Anyway, that's it for us today. You've been listening to Saltgrass with a Castlemaine Commons Collective special with Zoe Scoglio, and Zoe will be back with us in another 2 weeks for our final instalment of this series, and next week we'll have another Saltgrass episode for you ready to go. Thanks for listening.
Salt of the earth. Salt. Grassroots. Salt of the earth people. Grassroots change.
Saltgrass. Listen to all episodes of Saltgrass on your podcast app or at saltgrasspodcast.com.